The English Civil War, which took place from 1642 to 1651, was a result of growing tensions between King Charles I and Parliament, tensions that escalated over many years. The primary causes were a combination of political, religious, and financial disputes. The specific event that triggered the war was Charles I's decision to raise an army without Parliament's consent. Charles I believed in the divine right of kings, which meant he thought he had absolute authority and was not answerable to Parliament. He repeatedly dismissed Parliament and ruled without it for 11 years, from 1629 to 1640, a period known as the personal rule. His autocratic methods, including the imposition of taxes like ship money without parliamentary approval, angered many, especially the gentry and merchants. Charles married Henrietta Maria, a Catholic princess, which caused suspicion among his Protestant subjects. He tried to enforce religious uniformity, introducing Anglican practices in England and Scotland. In 1637, his attempt to impose the English prayer book on the Presbyterian Church of Scotland led to the bishops' wars, creating further resentment and financial strain. Charles' wars with Scotland and his extravagant court expenses left him heavily in debt. He was forced to recall Parliament in 1640 to request funds, but Parliament resisted, using the opportunity to limit his powers. In January 1642, Charles attempted to arrest 5 members of the House of Commons, accusing them of treason. This move was seen as a blatant violation of parliamentary privilege and a step towards tyranny. The attempt failed as the MPs fled, but it outraged Parliament and the public. Charles left London, fearing for his safety, and began raising an army. Parliament also mobilized its forces. By August 1642, the conflict reached a breaking point. Charles raised his royal standard in Nottingham, effectively declaring war on Parliament. The war was ultimately about who should hold the power to govern England, the king or Parliament. It resulted in the temporary overthrow of the monarchy, the execution of Charles I in 1649, and the establishment of the Commonwealth under Oliver Cromwell. The English Civil War consisted of several key battles between the forces of King Charles I, known as the Royalists or Cavaliers, and those loyal to Parliament, known as the Parliamentarians or Roundheads. These battles reflected deeper divisions within English society, and people chose sides based on their social, political, and religious beliefs. Many supported Charles I because they believed in the traditional monarchy and the idea that the king ruled by divine authority. Nobles and landowners often aligned with the king, fearing Parliament would challenge their social status and wealth. Charles I's supporters were typically Anglicans or Catholics who opposed the puritanical influence in Parliament. They feared Parliament's reforms would lead to radical changes in the Church of England. Support for the king was often stronger in rural areas and the west and north of England, where feudal loyalties remained strong. Many nobles and their retainers joined the royalist cause out of personal loyalty to Charles or his court. Many sided with Parliament to limit the king's power and ensure a system of governance with greater accountability. Merchants, townsfolk and tradespeople often supported Parliament, as they resented Charles's heavy-handed taxation and interference in commerce. Parliament's army attracted Puritans and other Protestant reformers who wanted to reshape the Church of England and remove perceived Catholic influences. The new model army was particularly popular among religious dissenters who viewed it as fighting a holy war. Established in 1645, the new model army was a disciplined, well-organized and meritocratic force. Unlike royalist forces, positions in the new model army were based on skill rather than social status, which attracted ambitious and capable soldiers. Many who suffered under Charles's policies, such as the imposition of ship money or religious reforms, joined Parliament's side out of resentment. Oliver Cromwell played a crucial role in Parliament's victory. As a commander in the new model army, he was instrumental in reforming its tactics and organisation. Cromwell emphasised discipline and merit, promoting officers based on ability rather than noble birth. His cavalry, known as the Ironsides, was famous for its discipline and effectiveness in battle. Cromwell's leadership helped Parliament win crucial battles like Marston Moor and Naseby. After the war, his influence grew, culminating in the trial and execution of Charles I in 1649 and the establishment of the Commonwealth. The Civil War wasn't just a military conflict, but also a deep societal rift. Families were divided, with members sometimes fighting on opposing sides. Regional and class loyalties shaped the choices people made, and the conflict forever changed the relationship between the monarchy and the people. The war ended with the monarchy's temporary abolition and the rise of the Commonwealth, led by Oliver Cromwell. After Oliver Cromwell's death in 1658, the leadership of the English Commonwealth passed to his son, Richard Cromwell. But Richard proved to be a weak and ineffective leader. This ultimately led to the collapse of the Commonwealth and the restoration of the monarchy in 1660, with Charles II being invited back to the throne in an event known as the Restoration. Oliver Cromwell had ruled England as Lord Protector from 1653 until his death in 1658. His rule was strict and centralized, with a strong military presence maintaining control. However, his policies, including religious restrictions and his dismissal of traditional parliamentary processes, caused resentment among many. Richard Cromwell succeeded his father as Lord Protector in 1658, but he lacked both the political skill and military support his father had. He faced significant opposition from factions within the army, radical religious groups, and Parliament itself. In 1659, under pressure from the military, Richard resigned and effectively abandoned the role of Lord Protector, leading to a power vacuum. After Richard's resignation, England descended into political chaos, with the military attempting to rule directly through a reinstated rump parliament, a remnant of the Long Parliament. Factionalism among the army and government leaders made governance difficult, and public dissatisfaction with military rule grew. Many people longed for stability and the return of traditional governance under a monarchy. General George Monk, a key military leader in Scotland, emerged as a pivotal figure during this period. In 1660, Monk marched his army south to London, restoring order and pressing for the reinstatement of a full parliament, including MPs excluded by earlier purges. This new parliament, known as the Convention Parliament, began negotiations for the return of Charles II, the son of Charles I, who had been living in exile. The Convention Parliament formally invited Charles II to return as king, issuing the Declaration of Breda, in which Charles promised amnesty, religious tolerance and respect for Parliament in exchange for his restoration. Charles II returned to England in May 1660 and was crowned king, marking the end of the Commonwealth and the beginning of the Restoration era. The Restoration brought a sense of relief and celebration across England, but it also marked the beginning of new tensions between the monarchy and Parliament, which would continue into the reigns of Charles II and his successors. Oliver Cromwell invaded Ireland in 1649, primarily to reassert English control over the country, suppress a royalist alliance there, and punish the Irish Confederates, who were largely Catholic, for their earlier uprisings and perceived alliance with Charles I during the English Civil War. The campaign was marked by brutal sieges and massacres, most notably at Drogheda and Wexford, which have become infamous for their brutality. During the English Civil War, Ireland had become a hotbed of rebellion and instability. The Irish Catholic Confederation, formed in 1642, had taken control of much of the country. In 1649, a coalition of Irish Confederates and English Royalists supported Charles II, the exiled son of Charles I, in his claim to the throne. This posed a serious threat to the newly established English Commonwealth. Cromwell's campaign aimed to crush this opposition and prevent Ireland from being used as a base for royalist forces. Cromwell, a Puritan, viewed Catholicism as a dangerous and idolatrous faith. He saw the Irish Catholic Confederates as enemies of Protestantism and the English state. His invasion had a strong religious dimension, and he justified his actions as a divine mission to punish the barbarous wretches for alleged atrocities against Protestant settlers during the Irish Rebellion of 1641. Ireland was seen as vital to England's security and economy. Controlling Ireland ensured that no foreign powers, such as France or Spain, both Catholic nations, could use it as a base against England. Parliament also sought to confiscate Irish land to pay off debts from the Civil War and reward its soldiers and supporters. The Siege of Drogheda, a fortified town north of Dublin, is one of the most infamous episodes of Cromwell's campaign. Cromwell's forces besieged the town, which was defended by around 3,000 Irish and Royalist troops under Sir Arthur Aston. After a short bombardment, Cromwell's troops breached the walls and stormed the town. Once inside, they carried out a massacre, killing not only the defending soldiers but also civilians, priests, and anyone suspected of being a Royalist or Catholic. Cromwell claimed the massacre was necessary to serve as an example and deter further resistance. In his own words, "I am persuaded that this is a righteous judgment of God upon these barbarous wretches." He argued that sparing the defenders would prolong the war and lead to greater bloodshed. Shortly after Drogheda, Cromwell's forces attacked Wexford, a key port town in southeastern Ireland. During negotiations for surrender, Cromwell's troops stormed the town, leading to widespread slaughter. Over 2,000 Irish defenders and civilians were killed, and the town was looted and burned. The brutality at Wexford further demoralized Irish forces and weakened their ability to resist. Cromwell believed that harsh tactics such as massacring defenders would intimidate other towns into surrendering without resistance. This approach largely succeeded, as several towns and garrisons capitulated after hearing of Drogheda and Wexford. Cromwell's Puritan beliefs made him deeply hostile toward Irish Catholics, whom he saw as both religious heretics and political enemies. Protestant settlers in Ireland had suffered massacres during the Irish Rebellion of 1641. Although the scale of these atrocities was often exaggerated in English propaganda, Cromwell used them to justify his own actions. Tens of thousands of Irish soldiers and civilians were killed during Cromwell's campaign. Many Irish towns and countryside were devastated, and famine and disease followed in the wake of the war. Large amounts of Irish land were confiscated and redistributed to English soldiers, Protestant settlers, and creditors of Parliament, further marginalising the native Irish population. Cromwell's regime implemented harsh laws against Catholics, including bans on public worship and the confiscation of church property. Cromwell's actions in Ireland are remembered as one of the darkest chapters in Irish history. His name remains deeply controversial, with many viewing him as a symbol of oppression and colonial violence. In summary, Cromwell's invasion of Ireland was driven by a combination of political, military, and religious motives. While he succeeded in crushing resistance and reasserting English control, his methods left a legacy of bitterness and division that endured for centuries.